Let me tell you about the most irritating game of Magic the Gathering I've ever played. Magic the Gathering is one of my favorite games, and in the umbrella of Magic the Gathering, there are several different formats. The most popular format is Commander, where you choose one legendary creature to be your signature ace monster, and then build a 100 card deck around that card. My favorite format, however, is Draft. In Draft, you don't bring any of your own cards at all. Instead, you and 7 other players buy 3 unopened booster packs each. You then sit and open them, and then take turns taking, or drafting, cards from the booster packs until all the cards have been taken. I like it because it really lets the players demonstrate their ability to think on their feet, improvise, and make the most of the cards that they've got. It gives the common cards a chance to shine, rather than just being cast aside. Anyway, because this format requires 7 other players, and collectively over $100, unless you happen to know a bunch of nerds with overlapping time schedules, the only chance you're ever probably getting to play Draft is by heading to a local game store. These are shops that sell board games, trading cards, D&D minifigures, that type of thing. So, getting back to the story, I buy my 3 packs and then go sit down and wait with the other players. I overheard one of the other players talking about how he had drafted this set hundreds of times and even reached the highest rank in the online version of the game. The draft begins, and after a few picks, I make an important observation. I'm getting past a lot of red cards. Now, typically in Draft, you try to build a 2-color deck, maybe a 3-color deck if you're willing to gamble on getting the right lands every game, but a single-color deck in Draft is almost unheard of, because if anyone else at the table is taking cards of that color, you're probably not going to get past enough playable cards in that color to make a decent deck. So, though it's typically a bad move, because of the signals that I was getting, I decided, cowabunga it is. I'm going all in on mono red. Using the cards that I had drafted, I decided to focus my deck around the theme of summoning as many rats as possible as quickly as possible to try to overwhelm my opponent's defenses before they could set up. This deck ended up being pretty strong. Red is the most aggressive color, and so it's pretty good at pumping out early game threats and punishing strategies that try to take their time. I steamrolled my round 1 opponent inside of 20 minutes, which left me half an hour to just chill out or go grab a soda or whatever. In Draft format, matches are best of 3 and the rounds last 50 minutes. So if 2 players happen to be playing slow decks, the rounds can go the full time or potentially even go into overtime, where they end up in a forced draw after 5 turns. Aggro decks shouldn't need to worry about that though. Or so I thought. My second match was against none other than the guy I'd heard talking a big game before the draft. And let me tell you, he was short with me right from the jump. His deck was blue and white, a color combo known for its slow, methodical gameplay of drawing a lot of cards, killing opponents' creatures, countering opponents' spells, and usually not playing any big threats until really late in the game to try to close it out. My opponent would play extremely quickly. Island, go. End step, quick study, that type thing. Whenever I would ask what card he just played or what he was doing, he would just roll his eyes and then grab the card and push it in front of me for a few seconds and then pull it back. Wouldn't make eye contact, wouldn't read the card, would just kind of scoff as though the question was beneath him. Unfortunately for him, his deck was definitely not ready to face a horde of rats right out of the gate, and so I managed to take game 1 pretty quickly. Side note, which player goes first in a game of Magic is a minor but not insignificant factor in deciding the game, kind of like it is in chess. It's decided based on a coin toss or a dice roll or that type of thing, and in our game, I'd actually lost the dice roll, meaning that I was going second in our first game, and I still managed to win. So winning in that position right away puts me in a really favorable spot, because from there on, it's the loser of the previous game who gets to decide whether they want to go first or second, meaning that even if I lost the second game, I'd be able to go first the third game. Back to the match, unfortunately in game 2, he knew a bit better what to prepare for. I was still able to do some solid early damage, but before I could close out the game, he managed to wipe my board of all my creatures. With him playing a lot of cards that allowed him to draw more cards, he'd quickly built up a sizable card advantage against me. All the while, he's continuing to play really fast and not narrate his moves at all, and only stopping if I interrupted him to ask what he was doing. I was also taking quite a bit of time to think over my moves before I would play, so I couldn't play anywhere nearly as quick as he could, which seemed to irritate him because, according to him, a mono red deck shouldn't really need to think about its moves. So he then began rushing me, frequently reminding me how much time was left in the round, telling me to speed up on my turn, and telling me that he needed a lot more turns in order to win, even though he was already in an extremely advantageous position card advantage-wise. We still had like half the time left in the round, so we weren't even really behind. The first game had ended quite quickly, and so to get this fussy when we were still reasonably on track to finish before time was a bit silly. But I guess the time pressure was really getting to him, because then he said, "Do you just want to go to game 3? Now, I've played a lot of Magic in my life, and I've literally never heard that before. I've heard "let's just go to game 2" before, but only in the context of admitting defeat for yourself in order to save yourself time for the next round. But he'd already lost the first game. Conceding game 2 would mean he'd lost the match. No, he was asking me to concede. At first, I literally thought I misheard him, but when he repeated the question, I firmly responded, "No," in a tone that I thought made it pretty apparent that I thought the question was a bit rude. We played through a few more turns, but I really couldn't keep any creatures on the board. He'd built up such a massive card advantage over me that my position was looking pretty hopeless, even though I'd gotten him down to 3 life. Even though I'd rejected his question before, he again states, not asks, states, "You should just concede. I have you beat." I'm not conceding. I can still win. No, you can't. You will not resolve any meaningful spells for the rest of the game. And like, he totally could be right, okay? He could have a hand that's just full of counterspells. Or he could be bluffing and just have a hand full of useless land cards. So I asked him, "Oh really? Show me then." And he really did. He was telling the truth. He revealed his hand and it was all counterspells. Cards that basically just say, whatever your opponent tries to play next, just take that card and put it directly to the discard pile instead of whatever it would normally do. See, you're beaten. You can't play anything, but my deck still needs a lot more turns to beat you. But at this point, I was pissed off at the sheer audacity of my opponent demanding that I concede. I was pretty sure it was against the rules to do that, and I could tell that some of the other players were starting to look over and notice that things were getting a bit heated. There was still one way for me to win. I had 2 cards left in my hand. One card called Ariet's Tempting Apple, a card which the last effect on the card literally just says your opponent loses 3 life, which in that scenario would just win me the game outright. But he'd obviously just counter it if I tried to play it. I also had in my hand the best card in my deck, a card called Song of Totenaz. This card allows me to pay any amount of mana and summon that many rat tokens to the field, which in that scenario would also have won me the game. However, he'd obviously also just counter that if I tried to play it. I only had 5 land cards in play, meaning I had only 5 mana to work with. He only had 4 land cards in play, so he had only 4 mana, meaning he could only realistically cast 1 counterspell per turn. So if I had the mana to play both of those cards, he'd be unable to stop me from winning. But this was impossible. I would need to spend at least 4 mana per card in order for those cards to win if they weren't countered. But like I said, Song of Totenaz can be cast for any amount of mana. This is where I decided to play a bit dirty and do what could reasonably be called an angle shoot. Angle shooting is a term from poker that describes doing something in a game that falls in the gray area between legal game action and just outright cheating. This usually takes the form of making an ambiguous gesture or saying something ambiguously, hoping your opponent interprets it one way, while maintaining enough plausible deniability to say, "No, I actually meant it the other way," and then capitalizing on your opponent's reaction. For example, in poker, you could imagine a scenario where one player goes all in, shoves all their chips in, and then another player pump fakes and pretends to shove their chips in, but doesn't quite shove them over the line to where it's fully committed, and then hopes that their opponent flips their cards preemptively and says, "Haha, I got you." And then they can be like, "Psych, I actually didn't bet all the way, so I'm gonna fold." That type of thing. These are real scenarios that do happen. It's dirty, it's unethical, it's heavily frowned upon, but it's also very difficult to actually try to litigate these scenarios out in real time because, again, plausible deniability. Anyway, here's what I did. I said, "I'll cast Song of Totenaz." And before I'd even fully gotten the words out of my mouth, my opponent immediately says, "I'll counter it." I said, "Okay." And then I reached down and I tapped 1 land card. He looks down and sees that I've only tapped 1 mana, and reaches over and taps all the rest of my lands and says, no, you're casting Song of Totenaz for X equal to 4, you're tapped out now. In case you're not following, me tapping only 1 mana is kind of a nonsensical move. The card costs 1 red mana and then any other amount of mana equal to the number of rats that I want to summon. And so to tap only 1 mana means that I'm paying X equal to 0, meaning that I'm just wasting the card. I'm not actually summoning any rats at all. There is no reason to ever do this. I was just trying to bait out a counterspell and hoping my opponent wasn't paying that close attention to how I was tapping my mana. It's funny, I only had the idea to do this because he specifically used the phrase, "You will not resolve any meaningful spells for the rest of the game," which I thought was funny because, like, why add the qualifier of meaningful? Like, why would I play any meaningless spells? But that made me think, nope, I cast it for 0, and now I'm going to cast Ariat's Apple. No, you're cheating, and unless you concede now, I'm going to call over a judge, and I'm going to have you disqualified. A lot of the other players were starting to look over, and honestly, I probably should have just let him call over the judge, because my little shenanigans with the Song of Totenaz card honestly pale in comparison to the fact that he was outright demanding that I concede several times over the course of the game. I'm pretty sure I could have just gotten him disqualified for that. But instead I just went, okay, whatever, game 3, fine. I shouldn't have done that. I should have stuck to my guns and gotten him booted out. But instead, I just completely rolled him game 3. I was going first that round, and so I just played a bunch of rats, cast the card Gnawing Crescendo to pump them all up, and then just bulldozed him before he could mount any sort of defense. The best part about it was that in these tournaments, in order to like report who wins, they give you these little pieces of paper that you have to like check off the win boxes and then sign. And so I got to like slide that over to him very smugly after he'd lost while he was still kind of seething. And I won the last round of the event too. So that put me in first place, undefeated, having never drafted the set before. Admittedly, I did get a bit lucky in that I was able to draft a full monocolored deck in a format like that. But, I mean, reading the signals in a draft is a major part of the skill set, so I don't want to undersell it that much either. But anyway, moral of the story, don't let people bully you, even in card games. It's funny, just the other day, I saw that someone left a comment on one of my old videos saying that they wish I would remake them. Well, the wait is over. Do any of you remember my old video, The Shark Tier List? I made that video in 2017, over 8 years ago. Well, I've decided that that one will be my first episode of Tier Zoo Remastered, a Nebula exclusive series that brings my old videos up to the quality of my modern work. Each month, I'll be posting a new remastered video taken from the first 4 years of my channel's lifetime to Nebula, who've graciously partnered with me to create these videos. Nebula is all about quality. Not only are they helping me remaster my old work, they're also funding hundreds of shoot-for-the-moon-style dream projects, including some of my favorite originals like Beyond the Backyard, a series about tracking down some of nature's most legendary critters by my friend Spencer from the channel My Wild Backyard, and Scav, a documentary about the largest annual scavenger hunt in the world by the Wendover team. Nebula is running its literal biggest deal ever, offering a full 50% off their annual membership. To get access to this massive library of high-quality content and every episode of Tier Zoo Remastered, you can either click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. If this is the type of thing you like to see, this is the best way to show it. Thanks again to Nebula for sponsoring, and thank you for watching.